9 kings once ruled among men. History remembers only what they became: hollow, screaming, faceless things bound forever to another's will. It rarely asks who they were before that, or why 9 different men from 9 different kingdoms each made the same fatal choice. Tonight we don't look at the wraiths, we look at the kings. It's easy to imagine the Nazgûl as though they were always what we see in the story: shapeless terror on horseback, voices like screaming metal, nothing human left to mourn. But Tolkien is specific about what they once were: great kings of men, not tyrants dragged unwillingly into evil, not fools tricked by an obvious trap, but genuinely powerful, genuinely accomplished rulers, each already at the height of what a mortal life could achieve. Of the 9, only one is ever named or given a real history in Tolkien's writing, and his story is worth knowing in detail because he becomes something the others never do. Not just a wraith, but a commander, a figure with his own will and ambition even inside his servitude. He is known as the Witch-king of Angmar. Long after receiving his ring, he took physical form again as the ruler of a real kingdom called Angmar, founded in the north specifically to make war on the exiled kingdoms of the Dunedain. For centuries, he waged a slow, grinding war against Arnor. The northern kingdom descended from the same line as Aragorn, eventually helping to destroy it entirely as a unified realm. Later, he became the Lord of Minas Morgul, ruling that fortress in Sauron's name, and eventually led the armies of Mordor itself as their supreme commander at the siege of Minas Tirith. There's a strange detail worth remembering about him, too. An old prophecy claimed he could not be killed by any man, a claim that turns out to be truer and stranger than it first sounds when his end finally comes on the Pelennor fields. The other 8 are never named. That absence isn't an oversight. It's the point. Tolkien tells us 3 of them were once great lords of Númenórean blood, men from the same noble lineage as Aragorn's ancestors, which makes their fall even more tragic, since they came from the same people who produced some of Middle-earth's wisest and most resistant kings. The rest were rulers of men, from various other kingdoms, chosen because each was already powerful enough, already accomplished enough, to be worth corrupting. But their names, their kingdoms, their individual stories, all of it is lost. Only the Witch King kept enough of his own will and identity to still be a character in the story, rather than simply one voice among 9 in a single collective horror. That's worth sitting with, because it reframes what actually happened to them. These weren't unusually greedy men, in the simplest sense of the word. They were men who had already built something they loved, a kingdom, a lineage, a legacy, and were terrified of leaving it unfinished. Sauron didn't need to tempt them with cruelty. He only needed to understand what it feels like to build something extraordinary and know you'll die before it's complete. And for a while, the rings delivered exactly what was promised. Each king found his years stretching far beyond what any mortal life should allow. Their kingdoms flourished, at first, under rulers who no longer had to rush their ambitions into a single lifetime. Imagine what that must have felt like at first. The strange, vertiginous relief of watching your own mortality recede into the distance. Watching your children grow old while you remained. Watching kingdoms rise and fall around you while your own endured. But Tolkien is clear about the price hidden inside that gift, and it's a quieter, more devastating price than simple corruption. The rings didn't kill these kings outright, and they didn't turn them instantly evil. What they did was stretch their lives unnaturally thin, the way a single portion of bread might be stretched to feed an army. Technically still bread, but no longer quite substantial enough to satisfy. Their extended lives began, slowly, to hollow. Not their bodies alone, but whatever it was that had made each of them a king worth following in the first place. Their judgment, their compassion, their capacity to want anything beyond the ring's power and Sauron's growing shadow over their will. This is where the tragedy sharpens into something almost unbearable to imagine clearly. Each of the 9, at some point, must have noticed the change happening to himself. There would have been a night, or a year, or perhaps a whole slow decade, where a king who had once ruled with real wisdom noticed that his thoughts increasingly circled back to the ring on his hand, that his love for his own people had thinned into something more like ownership, that his fear of death had been replaced by an equally consuming fear of losing whatever power now sustained him. And by the time each king recognized what was happening, it was already far too late to refuse it. The ring had already become the only thing strong enough to hold together a life that had been stretched well past its natural end. That's the particular horror Tolkien builds into their fall, and it's worth naming plainly, because it isn't really about monsters at all. It's about what happens when a person is given exactly what they most wanted: more time, more permanence, more control over their own legacy, without anyone warning them that the cost would be everything that made that legacy worth having in the first place. Eventually, each king faded entirely into the ring's service, becoming not a ruler in his own right, but merely an extension of Sauron's will, wearing whatever mortal shape remained after everything else had been consumed. Their kingdoms, whatever they once were, disappear from the story almost entirely, swallowed by time, forgotten by history, remembered only in the shape of the terror their former rulers became. We don't know most of their names. We don't know what they built, what they loved, who mourned them when they were still simply men. All 9 kingdoms and everything they once meant to the people who lived in them were erased so completely that only the wraiths remain in memory, as if nothing worth remembering had existed before the rings arrived. That erasure might be the cruelest detail of all. Not that 9 kings fell, but that falling cost them the right to be remembered as anything other than the thing they became. Somewhere in Middle-earth's forgotten history, there were coronations, marriages, children, harvests, small ordinary kindnesses done by ordinary rulers trying to do right by their people. All of it gone, folded into a single collective horror, riding black horses through the night, because 9 men once looked at their own mortality and made the same understandable human mistake. They believed that more time would let them become who they were always meant to be, rather than understanding that time was never really the thing standing between them and that. Maybe that's the quiet warning folded into their story, easy to miss beneath the terror of what they became. It was never really about greed or weakness or evil arriving from outside to claim 9 unlucky men. It was about 9 kings who wanted, more than anything, to simply finish what they'd started, and never realized that some things are only worth finishing because they end. If this story moved you, there are more waiting, quiet corners of Middle-earth that history remembers, but rarely feels. Subscribe and walk them with us.